Goedemorgen en welkom bij een webinar van H-praktijk en HR Academy dat vandaag in samenwerking met Winning Temp is georganiseerd. Naast mij in beeld zitten Merel en Christian. Merel is Country Lead binnen Winning Temp en Christian is CHRO bij Fellow Mind. En samen gaan zij ons vandaag meer vertellen over een beter welzijn op het werk en ontdek je in dit webinar de Zweedse succesformule voor werkgeluk. Nou, voor de mensen die Winning Temp nog niet zo goed kennen, dit bedrijf helpt organisaties wereldwijd bij het verbeteren van teamprestaties en het optimaliseren van werkgeluk. Mocht je tijdens dit webinar vragen of opmerkingen hebben, stel deze dan gerust in de chat. Christian en Merel doen namelijk hun uiterste best om al jullie vragen zo goed mogelijk te kunnen beantwoorden. Daarnaast willen jullie graag laten weten dat dit webinar ook wordt opgenomen en dat het dus mogelijk is om dit webinar ook nog eens rustig op een ander moment terug te kijken. De opname ontvangen jullie een dag nadat het webinar heeft plaatsgevonden, wat in dit geval morgen zal zijn. Ja, Christian en Merel, van harte welkom. Wat leuk dat jullie hier vandaag bij ons zijn en ons meer gaan vertellen over de succesfactor op het gebied van werkgeluk. Ik denk dat we alle heel erg benieuwd zijn naar wat jullie ons vandaag precies te vertellen hebben. En daarom geef ik hierbij graag het woord aan jou, Merel.
Hoi allemaal, goedemorgen. Dankjewel voor de introductie en wat leuk dat jullie er vandaag zijn. Nou, we zijn natuurlijk net al eventjes geïntroduceerd. Vandaag gaan we het hebben over onder andere hoe creëer je nou werkgeluk. Dat heeft heel veel te maken met het creëren van employee engagement, oftewel medewerkersbetrokkenheid. We gaan het hebben over Zweden versus Nederland. En vervolgens gaat Christian Randel, CHRO bij Fellow Mind, vertellen hoe zij dit binnen Fellow Mind hebben gedaan. Zij hebben namelijk de Employee Engagement Score enorm verhoogd, namelijk van de INPS van 20 naar maar liefst een score van 65. Dus dat is denk ik heel bewonderenswaardig. Ik zal mijn gedeelte in het Nederlands doen. Christian is Zweeds, dus hij zal straks overgaan in het Engels. Jullie mogen zelf kiezen hoe jullie de vragen stellen. Afhankelijk van wie de vraag straks zal beantwoorden, zal dat in het Nederlands of in het Engels zijn. Ik hoop dat dat oké is voor jullie. Laten we eerst beginnen met een kleine poll, namelijk welzijn op werk. Is dit onderbuikgevoel of is dit harde data? Wat denken jullie? Kijk, het gaat een beetje gelijk op tot nu toe. Het lijkt alsof mensen het of team onderbuikgevoel of team harde data zijn. Of misschien een combinatie van allebei natuurlijk. Maar die optie geven we helaas niet in de poll. Dus ja, interessant om te zien hoe dat gevoel is op dit moment. De meeste mensen neigen toch wel wat meer naar onderbuikgevoel. Ja, interessant. Ja. Laten we teruggaan naar de slides. Ja, even kijken. Nou. Ja, onderbuikgevoel speelt ook mee. Maar het interessante is, je kan echt het gevoel van medewerkersbetrokkenheid, welzijn toch wel meten. Het is toch wel een wetenschap, werkgeluk en welzijn. Waarom zijn wij daarvan overtuigd? Nou, in onderzoek met de Universiteit van Gothenburg hebben wij een meta-analyse uitgevoerd op basis van 636 studies naar werkgeluk of personeelsverloop en personeelsverzuim. En hieruit is naar voren gekomen dat er 9 factoren zijn die deze kunnen voorspellen. En met deze gezamenlijk kan je dus ook medewerkersbetrokkenheid meten. Ik ben benieuwd, er komt weer een polletje, of jullie op dit moment het gevoel hebben dat je zicht hebt op werknemers welzijn op de werkvloer. Dus als we even terug kunnen gaan naar de poll, dan ben ik wel benieuwd in hoeverre jullie dit meten. Hoe vaak voeren jullie een werknemerstevredenheidsonderzoek uit? Is dit nooit? Is het eigenlijk altijd onderbuikgevoel? Is het sporadisch? Doen jullie het standaard 1 keer per jaar of standaard meerdere keren per jaar. Kijk, de meeste organisaties doen dit standaard 1 keer per jaar. Dat zien wij ook veel in de praktijk. Met name aan het einde van het jaar wordt de medewerkerstevredenheidsenquête uitgestuurd. Ik zie toch dat sommigen het nooit doen, anderen doen het sporadisch. En er zijn ook mensen bij die het standaard meerdere keren per jaar meten. En ik denk dat het sowieso heel goed is om het te meten. En ja, hoe vaker, hoe beter. Want dan krijg je echt meer inzicht in, wel actueel inzicht in wat er speelt. Als we weer terug kunnen gaan naar de slides. Nou, we hadden het in het begin over de 9 voorspellers van medewerkersbetrokkenheid. En dus ook personeelsverloop en verzuim. Ik zal kort op ieder van deze 9 voorspellers ingaan. De eerste is leiderschap. En dat is het gevoel wat mensen hebben over hoe ze worden gemanaged binnen de organisatie. Zingeving is in welke mate ervaar jij zingeving in het werk dat je doet? Heb je het gevoel dat wat jij doet ook echt bijdraagt aan de organisatie? In welke mate ervaar jij werkplezier? Dat is jouw gevoel, jouw attitudes en gedachten die jij hebt als het gaat over jouw werkplek. Autonomie gaat over het gevoel dat je hebt over de mate waarin je zelf beslissingen kan en mag nemen tijdens het uitvoeren van je werk. Participatie gaat over hoe behulpzaam ben jij ten opzichte van andere mensen. Ben jij een ambassadeur ten opzichte van jouw organisatie? En in welke mate ben jij betrokken als er beslissingen moeten worden genomen? Betrokkenheid daarentegen heeft weer te maken met het gevoel van commitment die je hebt naar de organisatie. In welke mate ben jij bereid om bij te dragen aan de doelen en de visie van jouw organisatie? Hebben we het over werksituatie als voorspeller, dan gaat het over het werk aan zich. Over de taken van het werk en de psychologische en fysieke vereisten die daarmee gemoeid gaan. Ook werkdruk heeft hiermee te maken. Welke werkdruk ervaar je en hoe vind jij dat de werkdruk is verspreid? Onder jou en je teamleden, maar ook over een bepaald moment. Persoonlijke ontwikkeling. Nou, in welke mate krijg jij de mogelijkheden om de skills te ontwikkelen om beter te worden in je werk? En tot slot team spirit. Team spirit heeft te maken met de energie die jij krijgt om onderdeel te zijn van een team. Ben je trots om voor dit bedrijf te werken? En heb jij het gevoel dat je ergens bij hoort? En tot slot, wil jij de extra mijl gaan als jij daarmee je teamleden kan ondersteunen? Dus nou, deze categorieën samen, die voorspellen dus de betrokkenheid, de engagement van jouw werknemers, het welzijn van jouw werknemers. Zoals ook eerder aangegeven, zijn deze onderdelen zijn ook voorspellers voor verloop en verzuim. Taco, jij vraagt welke voorspeller is het meest dominant? Nou, eigenlijk werken ze allemaal samen. Dus als we kijken bijvoorbeeld naar verzuim, dan zie je dus dat er factoren zijn die wat meer ver weg zijn, maar zeker invloed hebben. En we hebben voorspellers die wat meer dichtbij zijn. En deze voorspellers die werken dus echt samen. Wat we zien in absentie is dat met name werktevredenheid een grote voorspeller is. Maar goed, werktevredenheid, dat heeft natuurlijk wordt ook weer bepaald door deze onderdelen. Ik weet niet of jullie mijn muis kunnen zien, maar bijvoorbeeld workload, leadership en ook is absentie, verzuim, wordt enorm voorspeld door je mentale gesteldheid. Ja, jullie krijgen de slides ook naderhand toegestuurd. In ieder geval de presentatie. De slides moet ik heel eventjes overleggen. Die delen we heel graag met jullie. Als het goed is, krijgen we jullie contactgegevens. Als jullie daar toestemming voor hebben gegeven. Als dat het geval is, dan sturen wij de slides ook nog eventjes naar jullie na. Maar dat is dan waarschijnlijk een apart mailtje. Nou, we hebben ook nog voorspelling als voorspeller van verloop. Kijk, een van de dichtstbijzijnde factoren hiervoor is bijvoorbeeld een turnover intention. Maar goed, die intentie om ergens anders te gaan werken, die komt natuurlijk ergens vandaan. Dus die komt dan bijvoorbeeld uit autonomie, uit hoeveel stress je ervaart, hoe betrokken jij bent bij je team, maar natuurlijk ook gewoon andere job options. Dus soms kan iemand ook heel tevreden zijn op het werk, maar als je ergens anders bijvoorbeeld nog veel meer kan verdienen en nog veel meer kansen krijgt, ja, dan wordt soms het gras ergens groener, ook al ben je ergens ook wel tevreden. We hebben want ik zie dat er best wel wat vragen hiervan binnenkomen. We hebben hier ook een whitepaper van. Dat is een wat meer wetenschappelijk artikel. Als je echt graag wil weten wat nou precies die voorspellers zijn, hoe ze samenwerken op verloop en verzuim, dan kunnen we die met jullie delen. Dus vraag daar gerust naar. Die is beschikbaar. Misschien voor sommige mensen iets te taaie stof, maar we hebben het en we delen het graag. Nou, waarom is employee engagement, dus medewerkersbetrokkenheid, zo belangrijk? Nou, we hebben zelf natuurlijk ook veel data inmiddels verzameld. En wat we zien is dat het uiteindelijk echt leidt tot minder personeelsverloop, verbetering van medewerkerstevredenheid en minder stress. En ja, die employee engagement, dat is iets waar je dus heel proactief aan kan werken. Wij bieden dan inzicht in die 9 categorieën, zodat je op ieder onderwerp en binnen elk team kan zien wat er precies speelt, zodat je daarop kan bijsturen. En uiteindelijk is dat voor de business ook heel interessant, want je ziet dat organisaties die betrokken medewerkers hebben, veel productiever zijn. Je hebt minder verloop, daardoor heb je dus ook minder kosten voor het zoeken van nieuwe medewerkers. Je hebt geen gat om te vullen, dus dat soort organisaties worden winstgevender. Ja, en het verzuim kan drastisch worden teruggedrongen. Nou, ik zie dat er best wat mensen zijn die de whitepaper willen ontvangen. Wij zorgen ervoor dat jullie deze zullen ontvangen. Nou, Zweden loopt als land echt voor op medewerkerswelzijn. Hier in Nederland begint het al steeds meer te leven. Maar Zweden staat toch wel echt voorop hierin. Ik werk dan zelf voor Winnington. Wij zijn van origine een Zweedse organisatie. Wij zagen dat er dus een grote behoefte was binnen de organisatie om welzijn van medewerkers te verbeteren en hier wat meer handvatten bij te krijgen. Dus ja, wij werken daarom. We hebben meer dan 1300 klanten in de Nordics. In Nederland zijn we dus nu ook aan het groeien. En Christian van Fellow Mind, die zal dus zien hoe zij employee engagement structureel verbeteren en hoe ze dat met winning temp ook onder andere aanpakken. Jullie zijn natuurlijk ook benieuwd, wat zijn nou de verschillen tussen Zweden en Nederland? Ik zal daar een aantal uitpakken voordat ik het woord geef aan Christian. In Zweden is de werk-privé-balans toch net ietsjes anders dan in Nederland, omdat het wat meer wordt gestimuleerd ook door de overheid. Dus bijvoorbeeld werkgevers zijn verplicht om bij thuiswerken ook een goede werkplek te bieden. En het ouderschapsverlof is ook heel anders geregeld dan in Nederland. In Zweden krijgen werknemers namelijk 12 maanden verlof die ze mogen verdelen tussen allebei de ouders. Dus bijvoorbeeld in een traditionele setting van een man en een vrouw kan ervoor worden gekozen dat de vrouw 12 maanden vrij krijgt. Of dat zij bijvoorbeeld 6 maanden verlof krijgt en de vader ook. Daarnaast heeft Zweden hele sterke vakbonden. In Nederland zijn vakbonden ook wel een ding. Maar het is niet zozeer altijd de standaard dat je onderdeel bent van een vakbond. En dat is in Zweden wel. En in Zweden mag de werknemer zelf bepalen bij welke vakbond deze persoon zichzelf aansluit. Dus bijvoorbeeld, ik zou bijvoorbeeld bij een vakbond kunnen gaan op het gebied van bijvoorbeeld software of misschien een vakbond in het gebied van sales. En als werknemer bepaal ik dat dan zelf. Stel dat een organisatie in Zweden moet reorganiseren, dan zullen de onderhandelingen er niet met de werknemer plaatsvinden, maar met de vakbond die de werknemer heeft gekozen om de werknemer te representeren. En tot slot, sociale zekerheidssystemen in Zweden. Het is zo dat de gezondheidszorg in het algemeen door de werkgever wordt betaald. En als we kijken naar kinderopvang, dan is dat voor de meeste mensen gratis. Tenzij je genoeg verdient, dan wordt er een eigen bijdrage verwacht. Maar dat is ongeveer maximaal €130 per maand. Dus daar zouden we in Nederland nog wel wat van kunnen leren, denk ik. Ja, er zijn zeker nice perks in Zweden. Dat klopt. Dus dit was het stukje over Nederland versus Zweden. Nu geef ik het woord graag aan Christian. So Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Meryl. I tried to pick up on some of the Dutch words, but I'm not sure that I understood that much. Anyway, thanks for having me. And the topic for my presentation is the Swedish approach to well-being in a data-driven way. And this is just a brief agenda. So I'm going to look at a brief background, looking at profitability and engagement, and what do you do with the result in Winning Temp as a Winning Temp user, and looking at the action planning methodology that I have developed in the Swedish company, and looking, of course, at the result and improvements and key learnings. You were talking about some things about Sweden and the Netherlands, and I just wanted to give you all a crash course in Swedish culture. I want to emphasize that this is not to be seen as better or worse than any other culture, but I want to put you in a context because that has to do with my presentation and how we have done things. So in Sweden, a lot of decisions are made by consensus and not solely by managers. We have something called the Jante law, which is a funny thing that means that nobody's supposed to feel better themselves than others. We're all equal. We tend to use the word leader instead of manager or boss. And we really like to advocate the right and courage to speak up if something is wrong at the workplace, no matter where in the organization we hear that voice from. We think a lot about freedom comes with responsibility, and we appreciate an organization with few hierarchical steps, so easy access to leaders and a high level of autonomy. So you could keep that in mind in my presentation. So what is the purpose of HR? Well, that's a very long question to answer, of course, but I usually look at it from a manager perspective when it comes to leading a company, and those are the priorities. We like to have quality in the things we do. That's really important for us. And FellowMind is a consultancy company working with Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform. So everything we do has to be quality in delivery. The number two is that if we have quality, we can have profitability. And if we have profitability, we can also manage growth. So those are important things for me in my role. And having said that, what can I as an HR person do to help out in this area? Well, I can develop and I can create engagement, because that actually equals quality. I can make sure that we have a high level of vitality and a high level of retention, so low level of churn. So that can affect profitability. And to affect growth, I can create a strong employer brand. So those things are really important to me in my role, being the chief HR officer of the Swedish company. So those are also my priorities. And if you want to do these things, you also have to measure things in real time. I'm very data-driven, very purpose-driven, so I need real-time measurement. And looking at the Swedish region, we had 3 companies a couple of years ago, and we knew that we were going to do a company integration in Sweden. And therefore, we had been looking at Winning Temp to measure things. And we also looked at Winning Temp primarily due to what Meryl was talking about when it comes to the scientific background. So we have a high engagement and a very high retention rate. That's what we are looking for. That's why we chose Winning Temp. And what I was facing as a challenge in 2021 around that time was that we do an integration of 3 companies. We needed a new way to work with strategy. So we needed to make a process of actually breaking down the group strategy for Fellowmind into Sweden and into the business areas, into the teams, and for all employees to know what are we actually having as a strategy, what strategic goals do we have. So that's one thing I needed to do. The other thing was that I had been looking at our leadership figures, and I understood that we needed a new methodology for employee development. And the last thing was we needed real-time data to measure improvements in the integration project, and coupled also to retention and sickness rates. So those were the challenges we were facing. So the first thing we did was to develop an employee development methodology that is based on something called self-determination theory. And to break that down very, very easily, it's all about competence, setting really clear goals with clear actions of what are the actions that an employee needs to take to fulfill a goal. And the other thing is autonomy, to give an employee the freedom to work with the actions to fulfill the goals, so not micromanaging them. And then the relatedness, that's giving feedback on the performance, and to do that every month. So that's something we did, and it could easily be explained like this. We broke down the strategy and the strategic goals for Fellowmind down on each employee level. So we have company goals, we have team goals, and we have individual goals. And then we actually work with this like an objective key results. So for example, for a consultant, a goal could be to package an app for a customer in either way. And the ways we would do this, the actions would be, of course, scan the market, build a business case, and develop the app. And so by doing this, we use this methodology to make sure that every employee knows what are our strategic goals and how can I affect them. And then we follow up on the goals every month, and we give them autonomy to work with the goals and the actions. So that was one thing we did that really helped us out in the leadership area. So then why did we choose Winning Temp for this? Well, like I said before, we chose due to the scientific background. So asking questions in all the 9 areas with focus on maximizing engagement, it's measured by ENPS and several other areas, of course. And a high level of engagement will lead to lower churn. It's also the other way, it's a higher retention and lower sick leaves. And in all this, hopefully it will lead to better quality, higher profitability, and to facilitate growth. So that has been a key factor when looking at Winning Temp, when implementing it, and now using it and developing it. So the implementation of Winning Temp in all 3 companies in Sweden, we send out 5 questions every Friday, plus the ENPS question once a month. We have had around ENPS of 20 when we implemented, and a response rate of 85. We had around 7.8 out of 10 in the leadership area. It was decent results. ENPS in Sweden in the IT sector is around 17. We had a flat level for about 6 months before the integration of the companies. But I also knew that we needed to do something more with the result, because the best thing you can do is to measure things you want to improve. But the worst thing is to measure without disclosing the results and not doing anything with the results, just relying on the things would change themselves on themselves. So what to do with the result in Winning Temp? Well, what I did was that I just produced something I called a process of action plannings. And that is based on that decisions in Sweden, going back to the crash course in the culture way, the decision and plans are not solely made by managers, but instead we try to collaborate in every team to create actions to actually do something with the results. And we work as a team, all opinions are appreciated. And together in the team, we set clear goals and actions, and we follow up on it every month. And what we believe is that if all employees are able to contribute to this, they will be more engaged than if a manager makes all the decisions about what to do with the results. And in this process, we also make sure that all employees and leaders have the same view on the meaning of the questions, because that is something that is really important. I'm sure that most of you probably know of the ENPS question. It has a range from 0 to 10, but we figured that many employees didn't really know what does this mean. If I answer a 6, that's pretty good, isn't it? But then you need to know how the questions are built up in a system like Winning Temp. So what we also tell our employees that as soon as you answer, for example, the ENPS question in a way that you're a detractor, then you also tell your manager, hey, I want our team to take actions on this. This really needs to be improved. So what we try to tell our employees that if you really want to make an action, please answer a 0 or a 6 or whatever, but don't answer a 7 or 8. And if you think that things are really good and you don't need to take an action, or we don't need to, please answer a 9 or 10, because that's the way we get the message that everything is okay. So what is the process of action planning? Well, yes.
There's a question from
Oh, sorry.
Lisanne regarding the goals.
Yeah.
Like, how do you follow up each month? And can you tell a little bit more about the 5 questions?
Yeah, so there is a standard package in Winning Temp, about 65 or 70 questions, and those are just being randomized every Friday. So every employees get 5 questions, but they don't necessarily get the same ones. So that's a good way of building data. So it takes about, I usually say about 2 or maybe 3 months to build enough data in a team of 10 or 15 people to actually look at the data in a scientific way. So that's one way to do it. But what we do is that every month our managers are disclosing the results. And I'm getting into this a little bit more detailed in my next part of the presentation. But we look at the goals in Winning Temp and the numbers. We look at them every month. I do it from an overview perspective, and our managers do it with their teams every month, disclosing the results, looking at it, and creating action. So I think it's going to be a little bit more clear after the next section here. So what we do when we start up, if I have a new manager who has never done this, we have a workshop about 1.5, 2 hours with a team. So if I'm a team manager, I will just collect my team members either live or either in person or through Teams, for example. And I discussed the current numbers in Winning Temp. What do we actually think about the numbers? What are things that we're doing really good, looking at the 9 temperature circles that Meryl was showing earlier? What are we doing really good, and what are improvement areas? And what improvement areas do we as a team decide on together that, hey, this area is something that we really need to do to work with during the coming quarter or half a year? So that could, for example, be the questions, do you find joy in your work? It could be any of the questions in Winning Temp. And in Winning Temp, as a team manager, you can also see every underlying questions in the 9 question areas or temperature areas. So what we do is that in the first half an hour, the team chooses 1 question to work with, oftentimes only 1. So it's a question that either we need to improve it or we need to really keep up doing a really good job in it. And then we let each team member create what we call actions. And an action is something that would improve the result. So if we do this, we would improve the result in the question. So an action is something that's really concrete and tangible that an individual or team can start doing tomorrow. So if we find a problem in not finding joy in our work, what are the actions that we could do to increase that? That could, for example, be that we meet together with a team once a week, just seeing each other and having a social environment, or anything else. And the whole company should have more parties. Well, that's not an action in this case. It's something for the HR department maybe to look at, but it's not something that the team could do. We should have a meeting for 50 minutes every Monday to share the workload in the team. Well, that is an action. or I must ask at least one colleague per day if he or she needs help with anything. That's an action. So the team members create actions. They write it on Post-it notes, use like you see in the picture, or they do it in like a virtual environment. And as a workshop leader, I just consolidate actions that are similar into groups. Maybe I look at an action and see, hey, this is not an action, please correct it and make something that is really tangible. So that's what we do. So we create a number of actions, maybe 50 or 60, I don't know. And then here comes back to the consensus way of doing things in Sweden, maybe. But every workshop member or team member uses 5 priority points on the actions. So they could maybe put 1 priority point on 5 different actions, or they could use all 5 priority points on 1 action that they find really important. And then after that, the workshop leader picks out the 2 to 4 actions with the highest priority. So what we have done is that together as a team, we have chosen a question area to work with. And as a team, we have created actions that are tangible. And as a team, we have prioritized the 2 to 4 actions that is most important. So we look at them. Do we understand the actions, or do we need to tweak them? And is it possible to measure if anyone has performed an action, and how do we track it? Because we really need to measure it. And how much do we think and hope that the actions will affect the temperature circles in winning temp? So what goal levels do we have? In winning temp, you can have from 0 to 10, and 10 is probably not feasible to have. I usually tell our managers that everything above 8 is really good. It's always the most expensive in time and money to tweak those last percentages. So everything about 8 is really good. And in what forum do we meet and analyze the result every month? So here it comes back to the questions you asked me, Meryl. So the manager meets with the team every month, and we look at the result, and we look at, has this actually had any effect on the result in winning temp? So just 15 minutes every month, analyze the result. Do we see any trends? Have we performed our actions? And if not, why have we not performed them? And do we need to change any actions? And once per month or per quarter, we look at, are we satisfied with the progress of these questions in the question area we were working in? And are there any constraints that make us not reach our goals? And do we need a new workshop to choose new actions or questions, or have we actually reached the goal? So we need to move on to the next question areas to work with. And if so, well, we'll just do a new workshop. So to sum up this, I usually see it as a funnel in every team. So the action planning is all about analyzing the overall result in the team. So we choose 1 or maybe 2 questions to focus on for the next 3 months. And we produce actions that corresponds to the question. Together, we prioritize the most important actions. And every month, we disclose the result of the actions with the team and look at the numbers in winning temp. And we correct the actions, of course, if necessary. Looking at this in FellowMind, and I'm talking about the Swedish part now, we are around 450 employees. And looking at this, we went from an ENPS of 20 to 67 from 2021, around 2021 to 2024. We actually had a lower ENPS for a while, and that was really interesting to have winning temp as a real-time data source, because I could monitor the integration project we did of the 3 companies into one company. I could really monitor that from week to week, and we clearly could see that numbers were going down in the beginning of the integration. But then we did a lot of work for doing the integration also in a cultural way. And then we could, after about half a year or 9 months, we could see all the results going up again. So we had an ENPS from 20 to 67. We had a leadership figure in winning temp from 7.8 to 8.7, which is, I would say, is very, very high. You can also see that we have a team spirit of 8.8 and a commitment of 8.7. We went from a churn from 18 to 11%. And then you should keep in mind that we have a growth of around 7 or 8% per year organically. So I would say that that's a number that I'm very proud of. In Sweden, the churn last year in the IT sector was around 18%. and in fellow mine in Sweden it was 11. We could clearly see an increase in profitability. You could also see a lower number of sick leaves and a minimum number of burnouts. I'm sure you all know that the IT sector have some burnouts, but we have very, very few. And during the same time, we integrated 3 companies. And let's see here. I think I'm going to do my last slide before answering questions here. These are my key learnings. The best thing you can do is measure things you want to improve. And like I said before, I'm very data driven. I like to use data to make decisions and make improvements. But the worst thing you can do is to measure things to improve, but not telling what you do with the results. Just relying on that if we measure things, people are automatically going to improve things. That's not going to happen. I see Winning Temp not as an HR tool. It's a business tool. The CEO must take responsibility for the result. The CEO must have Winning Temp and the results at the top of the agenda. And that's the way we have done it in Sweden. So our CEO is really enthusiastic about Winning Temp, and not the least due to the fact that we have made so much improvement. If you ask me personally, do things in the right order. So for me, leadership always comes first. We had somewhat lower leadership figures that you could see before on my slides, and that everything starts with leadership. So employee development, like I told you before, the model for that's why we started with that, to make a leadership better. I also tell our managers, don't forget about the process. The results are important. The NPS is really important, but the process of managers working with their team is the real benefit. So working with employee development and working with the action planning and Winning Temp, that's the process that really is the important things. And the last thing, don't get too relaxed when you have reached your goals. In my case, what I'm doing now, I'm trying to remind all of our managers and teams that this is when we need to keep up the good work that they're doing. So that's the key learnings I would like for you to have with you after my presentation. So maybe some questions there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I saw some questions coming in during your story that I wanted to keep to the end. So the first question, I think, is something that is in mind of quite some people, is how do you create buy-in in all the teams?
Well, it starts with, I think it starts like this. For Fellow Mind, we have, for example, the EMPS as one of our 4 strategic goals for every year. We have that as a group. It's not only in Sweden. So this is something that our the top management really has a high priority on. And that is why it's also high priority out in the country. So we get measured on this every month. Just with that, like we get measured on the profitability or billability in our case, or growth, or whatever it is. So it needs to be something prioritized by the group management. That's the short answer, I think, on that question. But the long answer is also that if you look at the results that we have created, it's really, really easy to get a buy-in into this, because we have such a good track record. And that's also something that I talked about our Swedish CEO when we chose Winning Temp, that I felt a really high level of confidence in the scientific background. I mean, everyone wants a high engagement if it leads to lower churn and lower sick numbers and higher engagement and a better employer brand. I mean, how could you say no to that?
Yeah, and I think also by giving transparency to your employees, like what are you doing with the result, it also motivates them to contribute.
It's fully true, and that's also why we are working with the action planning methodology out in the teams. It's not about me as an HR person telling everyone, hey, do this. Instead, we let all the employees actually have an effect on their own work situation and the work environment.
Yeah. And then, of course, like many other organizations, Fellow Mind is an organization that has a lot of projects right now. So one of the questions is, how did you manage all the actions in the context of a demanding environment? Because most of the time, the project portfolio is already overloaded.
Yeah. Well, it's all about doing this every month, because then you don't have to spend a lot more than like 10 or 15 minutes in your team doing this. And and all our team managers have team meetings every month with their teams anyway. So it's actually breaking it down, because if you do things, I usually take the example that if you do a survey for employees once a year, then it's 1 year to the next survey, and then you don't know the progress of the results. So it's all about showing the progress and doing it every month. Then it doesn't take that much of a time. Our managers also have employee development meetings with their team members every month. And that's also something that's maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, looking at actions and goals,
Yeah.
following up every month.
And then fellow mind, how many employees do you have?
Yeah, so in Sweden we have 450. We're 2,200 in the north of Europe.
Yeah.
In 6 different regions.
Yeah. So one of the questions is, do you think this approach also works in a bigger company with 3,500 employees?
Yes, I'm sure it does, because when it comes to the way we do it in Sweden, I think the methodologies are scalable to unlimited growth. In my book, of course, it needs more management. From an example, I do things. I mean, I look at winning temp figures every day. So if I would have 3,500 employees, I would need colleagues helping me out in this area, of course, because you need to break things down and so on. But I don't see any problems doing it in a larger context at all.
Yeah. Then there's also a question, could you share how the results in winning temp look like? Yeah, actually you already did.
Yeah, actually, yeah, exactly. So this is the main view in winning temp when I log on as an admin. So it's just a print screen from our actual Swedish environment. And then I could look on the underlying. There's so much data to look at. I like data, so I love winning temp. There is so much data to drill down on, looking at comparisons between all the different teams in the Swedish company. I can look at it from many different angles, for example, like data spans and whatnot. So yeah, it's really easy to drill down in the underlying figures. So taking, for example, the leadership, you can see that there is also some signs that it's scientifically correct. We have enough data to see that this is reliable numbers. I can also drill down and see how have people answered each question. Of course, everything is anonymous. I can't see anything at all about who has answered anything, but I can see the team numbers underlying, if the teams are large enough.
Yeah, so I think that's also one of the benefits of winning temp. So yes, there's science behind it. Yes, it's complex. Yes, there's a lot of data, but it's presented in such an easy way, as you can see here. Like as a leader, for example, you don't need to have any knowledge at all. It's just presented for you in a way that you can immediately take action. And then
I also think that winning temp has improved a lot since we implemented it. Nowadays, you also get comprehensive reports as a manager. These are the trends in your team. You don't really need to do the drill downs that I do every day. You can also get suggestions about actions in a way that wasn't possible before. So there is also some functionality around actions in winning temp as well.
Yeah, I think that also is a good bridge to the question that Maria is asking. What is the span of control of your leaders?
Oh, the span of control. So we have usually a consultant manager or team manager has a team about 10 or 15 consultants. And then, of course, we have a layer of middle management as well. But if that's what the question is, that's around the numbers.
Yeah. I think also for a leader is that they get their own dashboards. They can see how their team is performing on each of these 9 categories.
Yeah. They see the same thing as I do. It's just like me as an administrator, I can drill down on every teams in the hierarchy. But yeah, this is what the team manager would see as well for their own team.
Yeah. So for example, a team manager, let's say that autonomy is quite low. So that means that people don't have the feeling that they are being trusted in making their own decisions. A leader sees that data and gets advice on what actions to take with his or her team in order to make that better.
Exactly.
I would say that the leader has quite a lot of control.
Yeah, a lot of control, and also as a manager or a leader, you you can send in comments also in Winning Temp. So there is an anonymous comment function, and those comments can be sent to my own manager, or it's sent only to HR. So there is a chat function where you could also send in comments if you want to be anonymous about it, which is really good. Our employees do that a lot.
Yeah. Then there's another question.
Mhm.
It appears that the focus of the team meetings or one-on-one conversation is actions and goals.
Yeah.
Does it mean that the leadership field of care/well-being is not a part, or maybe a little part, of the formal interactions?
If the well-being is not a part of the formal.
Yeah, so it appears that the
Mm.
focus of the team meetings or
Yeah.
one-on-one conversations is actions
Yeah.
and goals.
Yeah.
Does it mean that the leadership field of care and well-being is not a part of the formal interactions?
Yeah, I understand the question. So let's look at this one. So looking at employee development methodology, the self-determination theory, looking at competence, autonomy, and relatedness. It's really interesting because at the same time I was developing this, I had some meetings with a organizational psychologist that we are using. So we look a lot of at stress. So if we have people in the organization that doesn't feel well, we send them to a psychologist. No cost for the employee, of course. It's a part of the well-being. And the thing is that he had conducted a study at one of the universities in Sweden, looking at what are the most severe burnout factors. And that's actually doing the reverse thing that we are doing. So you don't set any goals at all on your employees. So they don't know what they're supposed to do or what they're supposed to achieve. And then you micromanage them. So you don't give them autonomy. Instead, you tell them what to do, but they don't know why. And then you never give them feedback on how they're doing, or you give them feedback that doesn't have anything to do with goals. That's the easiest way to burn out people. And in my role as an HR manager, I have handled some burnout cases throughout the years, and that's really something that most of those cases have in common. So if we do this in the self-determination theory way in employee development, we're working with vitality every day. And that is by doing this. So you set clear goals that the employees have been able to actually set themselves in some ways, and you give them freedom, and you let them do things by their own way. And of course you help them if they need to. You help them to prioritize, and you give them really good feedback on everything every month. That's a good way to not burn people out. So I think we're working with vitality and well-being every day, every month with our employees.
And then there's another question about ENPS as an indicator. Maybe I can answer this one, and if you want to add something.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the questions is, what is the scientific base of ENPS? So Employee Net Promotion Score. Is it trustworthy? Because a lot of people are aware of the Net Promotion Score, which is normally, you buy a product and it would be like, would you recommend it to a friend? It's the same as, would you recommend working for this employer? The scientific base of ENPS as an indicator is, it is created by a company called Bain & Company and Fred Reichheld to measure customer experience. It will not give you a complete picture of how your employees feel, but it gives you a sense of how it is going. And that's exactly why we have Winning Temp and why we created these 9 categories that are predictors for churn and absenteeism. But I think if we look at, we call that the temperature when we measure it. So if you look at both the temperature and ENPS, I would say you have everything covered.
I think that's a really good answer to that question, Meryl. And what we do is also that's really interesting. I had meetings with some of our vice presidents yesterday, and we looked at, hey, you have a really high ENPS, but you have very low or lower numbers in some of the temperature circles. Why is that? And also, on the contrary, you have really high numbers in the circles, but you have a lower ENPS. Why is that? So it's all about using that as a main temperature, and then, of course, drilling into all the details. And that's really interesting. We can see that we have a really high ENPS in some teams that have a high workload. So even though they're working in big projects with a tough situation, we have some projects, maybe 100,000 hours over 3 years. So even if they have a tough time, they have a really high team spirit, high leadership numbers, and a high ENPS. So then it's really interesting to drill down and do those comparisons in my book.
Yeah. Then there's another question coming in. This person says, if you send employees to a psychologist, aren't you externalizing the solution? Do leaders then have enough impact on the solution of the problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think you have to draw a line. What are our managers supposed to be professionals in? So a manager can't be good at everything. They're not good. They're not sufficient in labor law. That's my profession, and I am not a psychologist. So, but I know enough about the area to identify that, hey, now as a manager, you can not really do much about this because this person has maybe have problems in the private life. And as an employer, how long should you go when trying to help an employee? So what we do is that we use our psychologists to help people out at the same time working with their manager. And that has been a very good effect. Oftentimes, an employee would see a psychologist like 4 or 5 times, getting really good strategies to work with some things, mainly in the private life or private part of their lives. And then they can also use it in the work life. For example, like the prioritization matrix that we use. That is something I can help our manager with, and I can help our employees with it when it comes to work life. But when it comes to the private life, maybe a psychologist is better to facilitate that. So I see it really as a team effort. So our managers do a lot of things, I do some things, and then we take external help.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Christian, for your story. I think it's very inspiring. Here are our contact details. If you have any questions around the way of working at Fellowmind, you can reach out to Christian. If you have more questions about winning temp as an employee engagement solution or the science behind it, feel free to reach out to me. Then lastly, there will be an HR Leaders Network lunch on the 13th of June in Utrecht. It will be for HR managers and CHROs. It will be tiny because it's the first time we're trying this out, so we're going to keep it a little bit easy for us to grasp. If you would like to be at this network lunch, we will discuss topics around employee engagement. So before the event, we will ask you for the topics that you want to discuss, and we will discuss them during lunch. It will be free. We have a maximum of 7 participants. If you would like to be part of this lunch, it will be in Utrecht. Let me know. And then, yeah, if there are limited seats, but yeah, just let me know if you want to be a part. It will be like a live session. So yeah, thank you so much for being at this webinar. We hope you learned something. And don't be a stranger. Get in touch if you have any questions.